Hi, welcome back to Lead Open Podcast. I'm Charna Cassell, and today's guest is Zach Beach. And he addresses love and lives love from so many different angles. He's a coach and a poet and a yoga teacher. And so he's just living and breathing love. And he has courses as well as books available to explore. And you'll find there's a certain way that he answers every question and approaches the way that he thinks about things is almost in a Dharma talk. Like every question, you get this little sweet, these analogies that make things very real and relatable. And I hope you walk away feeling really curious about how you love and reflect on the value of love. So enjoy.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
Welcome, Zach.
Thanks so much for having me, Charna. It's nice to
I'm,
see you.
I'm glad to have you. And I love that you seemingly walk your path so thoroughly and that you approach life with such a holistic, like you're from embodiment, there's intellectual and spiritual rigor and heart-centered practices focused around love.
Mm. Fooled you. No, I'm just kidding. It's all front. No. It's just the power of intention, as I'm sure you are exploring in your own life. We know our why, and my why is always love. And it's a tree with many, many branches. And I've uncovered a few branches on the tree, as you have in your wonderful life. And I'm sure many of your listeners, inspired by your own heart and your work, are also following this path of love.
Well, and it's what I find is that people often teach what they themselves need practice in and, what they need to learn. And so I'm curious about that in terms of when you look back and you look back into your childhood and you go like, were there signs, were there moments in time that you can point back and go, oh, love was my purpose and the path that I would end up on?
Mm. It's hard to say. I do feel like, in general, the first half or 18 years of my life was learning. And since then, it's been unlearning, or there's been conditioning, and now there's been deconditioning. And around all sorts of areas, like what it means to living and being in this world. So, as an example, when I was growing up, I was told you have to have a job and you got to go to college. So I got a very job. Like I got an engineering degree and got a very job. But I was like, my heart isn't in this. And I was like, there must be more to life. There must be more for me to explore. But there were other hints, of course. Like I remember being told I was a writer or a good writer. But no one also told me that you can make a living doing writing or writing about the heart. They're like, oh, yeah, you might do some technical writing, or you could be a journalist and write about politics or something. But no one told me, oh, yeah, write poetry. That'll bring you success in life. So I do feel like my journey has been just shifting from the head to the heart. We live in a very cognitive centric world, lost in our own thought, believing everything that we think. And it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes discipline to live from this heart space.
Well, what was your modeling around love and loving?
I'm very fortunate. I don't think I could do this career that I'm doing if I had not received the unconditional love from both my parents, especially my mother. She would give me, even today as an adult, she would give me the shirt off her back if she knew it would warm me. So a lot of the times, even if I was in college and my mom like paid for a meal, I'd be like, no, let me pay for it. She always believed in paying it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I've taken that. I feel like I've received a lot of love in the early years of my life, and I am paying it forward and
Mm,
helping others love themselves
mm,
and
mm,
helping others
mhm.
be more compassionate.
So you really got a physical imprint of knowing how to receive, because a lot of people after trauma, they have to literally, like you said, like uncondition, closing and learn how to physically open.
Mhm, mhm.
And so it started with mom. Mom was, a great teacher of how to do that. But then you became a yogi. And so can you talk some about the body as an access point for experiencing and opening to love?
Absolutely. Before we get into the body, let's just mention real quick that love is the deepest human need.
Hmm.
We all want to be loved, to be seen, accepted, honored, validated for exactly who we are is just a fundamental need as food and water. And especially for developing children, developing brains, is love is the framework, love is the structure. And we often aren't even in touch with our own emotions until a loving and attuned parent can reflect it back. So, this is why something like trauma from a caregiver, something like neglect or abuse from a caregiver is so challenging and so disorganizing to the human experience. It's really hard to reconcile at a young age that this person I am dependent on, that this person who says that they love me is also a source of pain. So, because love is the deepest human need, a lack of love is often the deepest human suffering. Like
Hmm.
when we get dumped, that's a heartbreak. Your heart is breaking. And at the same time, the abuse, neglect, and trauma that we might experience from primary caregivers, it's going to take some time to heal. Those wounds run very deep. So, absolutely, the first part is to begin to set firm boundaries, to begin to regulate ourselves and begin to take care of ourselves, and often give ourselves a love that we never received or even had models for when growing up. And as I mentioned, we do live in a very cognitive centric society, lost in our own thoughts. I often say that even the Buddha 2000 years ago diagnosed humanity with chronic NST, nonstop thinking.
Mm.
So we're all suffering from nonstop thinking, and we do need to return to the body. And there's so many amazing, incredible things to be found in this body of ours. As soon as you go down, of course, you find the heart and the source of love and compassion. But you also find a level of intuition and wisdom and knowing. I'm sure you talk about this all the time in your own work. We have this term, I have a gut feeling about this. I'm like, yeah, that is your body sending you information. It's quite clear in language as the mind might create, but we have all sorts of somatic signals that the body sends us. So we gain a source of wisdom and knowledge that we weren't in touch with before. We get in touch with the heart. And I often say, or often have my students inquire, do you ever say, I think I'm alive or I think love? You don't. You say, I feel alive.
Mm.
I feel love. Even if you were to go to like another country and you were to introduce yourself and that you want to tell the person who you are you going to say, I'm Charna and point to your head? I'm pointing to my head for those that can't see. Are you going to say, I'm Charna? No, you're going to put one hand on the heart and you're going to say, oh, I'll say,
Mm.
I'm Zach. You're saying your sense of beingness, your sense of aliveness is also to be found in your body, and love is also to be found in your body.
Mhm. When I was working in Nepal at an orphanage, and one of the things I would do with the kids and with the teachers was we'd make a distinction. We would have a number that we were like, "What's to check in? How is your state today?" There's your mind, your body, and your emotions. So the kids would start to walk around and they'd go, "Hello, miss. What is your number today?" And they would the timber number katiho was what they taught me
Hmm.
how to say to them. And so it was this very sweet awareness that was developing these distinctions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're not all one thing.
Yeah. And it's really important to recognize the slowing down that is required. The mind is very fast. If I say, think of a pink elephant, boom, pink elephant is in your head. If
Mhm.
I say, what does it feel like in your right pinky toe? You got to be like, oh, hold on a sec. Like back into the files. Let me check. Let me see. So, an idea I've been exploring in my own practice is how in yoga we have this concept of tapas, which means both discipline and fire. And it's usually a metaphor for how we're burning away impurities. It's really easy to conflate pure and impure with sexual purity and impurity, which is the Western mind, but it's nothing to do with that. And even the act of slowing down is gonna burn away all sorts of impurities. The
Mm.
impurities that tell us to rush, the impurities that say you're not enough unless you're doing X, Y, Z. We always feel like if we're not running as fast as we can, we're going to be falling behind. So just sitting still and being with our breath and being in our bodies. And with trauma, of course, you want to titrate this sort of thing. Just want to head right into this. But once we're at a point where we're able to regulate and widen our window of tolerance or just be with our inner experience, again, it tunes us into the wisdom of the body, but it also burns away the impurities of always needing to do something, always needing to prove ourselves, always running from one thing to the next, but never being fully present with our experience. So it's important to recognize the body is on its own pace and
Mhm.
we have to slow down our life, slow down the mind in order to get in touch with the more subtle aspects of our experience.
What that reminds me of is, I mean, there's different kinds of dysregulated nervous systems, right? So there's hyperarousal and hypoarousal. And with hypoarousal, there often tends to be more numbness in the body. And I'm thinking about earlier when you were talking about how you had that access point, like you had the imprint of knowing what love felt like.
Mm,
And a lot of the times, what happens with trauma is there can be a self protective response and numbing of the body,
mhm,
right? And so,
mhm,
so I think about people who go, I've never been in love.
mm,
It's like how, if you can't feel your body, you can't feel your intuition, you can't feel your instincts or your sensations, how do
mhm,
you even know what love feels like or being in love feels like? And so what
mm.
would you say to them?
To someone who says they've never been in love?
Like someone who's never been in love and as someone who knows how there are some people who feel everything. They can, feel so much anxiety because of all the sensations and they're moving very fast. And other people who may have a slower pace, they don't always go hand in hand, but then there's a numbness,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So, how does somebody know that they're in love? How does somebody know what the sensations of love feel like? Or being in love are two, you know, distinctly different things as well. But
Well, sometimes I call our intention step 0.
Mhm.
It's what we do before all the other steps. And we've already talked about how being seen, honored, and recognized for who we are is a fundamental human need. So that's the first step. And by the first step, I mean the 0 step is to
Mm.
love somebody. So if once someone does say, like, oh, I've never felt love before, and you will see all sorts of other kind of, you might label them as limiting beliefs, but like, I'll never be in love. No one will ever love me.
Mm.
It's easy to just jump to the advice, jump to the problem solving, jump to, if someone says you're ugly, no, you're beautiful. But I often share the etymology of compassion,
Mm.
and kan is with, and the pati that it comes from means to suffer. So it's a suffering with. So there's always a joining, there's always an empathy required in order to really be with somebody. So it's possible, we could deconstruct the ideas that maybe they have been in love or they could felt hints of it, but just be with, just be like, wow, that sucks. Like I hear you and I feel you in that like you've never been in love before. And the reason that you're expressing this is because you want love. And that's tough. Like I've never had Farquhar or like I've never been to Afghanistan or something like that. People don't often they complain about not having a certain experience unless
Right.
it's something that they deeply want.
Mhm.
So we can also kind of activate that yearning and that desire and affirm that a person does that they need sorry, the person deserves all the love that their heart can hold. Because that's a conclusion we often come to. Like, as a growing child, if we experience abuse and neglect, an outside adult might be like, yeah, that's a terrible parent. As a child, you can't come to that conclusion. You don't want to think that your parent is terrible. It's actually more comforting to a child to think that I am terrible
Mhm.
rather than my parent is. So then we have this deeply rooted uh, belief, and we can begin to just deconstruct that as an adult by really affirming that we do deserve and are worthy of love.
Yeah, it's a terrifying belief to think that your parent is bad in some way because you're so dependent on them for your survival.
Absolutely.
You used a phrase which I was like, "Oh, I haven't heard somebody else exactly say it that way." I used to have a mantra, a heart-centered meditation practice, and I'd breathe through the back of my heart and I'd breathe out the front of my heart. And I would say when I would breathe out the front of my heart, I give all that my heart can hold.
Mm,
Right? So I'd be like, all the support I need is here. I'd breathe in sync to my heartbeat. So I'd breathe through the back of my heart. All the support I need is here. And then exhale. I give all that my heart can hold.
mm.
And so that was sweet to hear you say that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The
Yeah.
breath is such a powerful tool, and uniting our intention with our heart, with our breath. It's another thing we find when we come into our body. We are breathing and we are alive. And we do find a sense of wholeness in that linking together body, breath, movement, intention.
And which you get to do every day as a yoga teacher and then in your own practice. Yeah. It's really, it takes the beingness, like being what you're wanting to teach to a different level when you get to embody it that way. And that's really
Mm,
beautiful.
mhm.
Yeah.
Can't remember what book I was reading that mentioned this, but it's almost like a paradox that a great way to learn something is to teach it.
Hmm.
And, like, in high school, some teachers are starting to be like, "Oh, if you feel like you understand this, turn to somebody next to you and explain it to them."
Hmm.
And then it helps both of
Hmm.
you deepen your understanding.
Hmm.
So, one thing I do really love about teaching is it does make me on top of my game. If I'm going to share any of these subjects, I better make sure that I know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And not only and one of my favorite other things that happen is when a student asks a question, I try my absolute best in that moment to answer it, and then I spend the next 6 months ruminating on all the better answers.
Oh
And
man.
that's part of it.
Yeah.
That is part of it, reflecting, integrating,
Hmm.
and being open to new ways of understanding.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely that constant flowing educational, mutual educational experience between therapist and client. And anytime a client refers to a book or a movie,
Mm,
because I want to fully understand their experience, I
mhm.
will like take that on and I curse them when it's like a show with 7 seasons. I'm like, no. Yeah, that's sweet. And hopefully it's not like, the perfectionist in you goes to town, but more like you get really curious and you dive deep into the exploration of the subject.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, given there is inside of relationship, there's so much suffering and there's so much harm that can come, especially regarding developmental trauma as well as social trauma. I'm curious about how much forgiveness, also given
Mm.
that you're on a spiritual path and from a spiritual vantage point, it's much easier to be with forgiveness. I'm curious how much forgiveness has played a role in your work.
Something we mentioned earlier is, like, how to help somebody who's struggling with love
Mhm.
and sort of deconstructing a number of those beliefs that might be getting in the way. And we have all sorts of social and cultural beliefs around love, such as you cannot love somebody else until you love yourself.
Mm,
I even heard one person say, no one's going to love you if you don't love yourself.
mm.
It's like, wow, that's rough. But often in relationships, we do learn what love is via somebody loving us in an unconditional way. That tends to be almost the go-to recommendation. Like, oh, you're anxiously attached, insecurely attached, disorganized. Just be with somebody who's secure and they'll repair you. And it's like,
Repair you.
and it's like,
And then for people who can't see, he just made this gesture with a fist that looked like very intense repair.
well, it's like, yeah, in a perfect world, we would experience some perfect being to love us, which is where spirituality can come into play.
Mhm.
Maybe we can find some divine being that really inspires us. But often the path to self love is catalyzed or initiated by somebody loving us. Often the path of forgiveness is initiated by somebody forgiving us, right? When you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I feel guilty and judged and blamed and shamed. And the person's like, it's okay. We all make mistakes. You're like, what? I could accept myself despite or even with by joining together with my imperfections and mistakes. And no matter what happens or doesn't happen or what mistakes I make or whatever doesn't get done by the end of the day, I still deserve love and I'm still a lovable human being. That can be extraordinarily healing.
Mhm.
So, forgiveness is a lovely practice because in understanding what forgiveness is, we do begin to deconstruct many ideas of what we think forgiveness is supposed to be. So, a lot of people absolutely conflate forgiveness with condoning or approving. They believe it has to do with the other party.
Mm.
Like, I can't forgive that person after what they did.
Right.
Good news. Forgiveness isn't about that person. It's about you. So we've already talked about developmental trauma, and there's that famous quote, forgiveness is the release of all hope for a better past. And we can begin to forgive ourselves that we are not what happened to us. So forgiveness is really an important movement of self-love. It is an affirmation that we deserve love and we deserve peace and we deserve to be honored and accepted for who we are, no matter what has happened to us. So forgiveness is absolute internal shift, an internal release that can happen. And lately, an interesting idea I've been exploring in some of my yoga classes is I'll begin with a pop quiz. So I'll be like, pop quiz, is light a particle or a wave? And then people are like, ah, it's both, but it's also neither. And I'm like, great. Are you a spirit or a human? Oh, a little bit of both, a little bit of neither. So lately, one of my pop quizzes has been, where is the past and the future? And I'm like, can you show it to me? Can we go there? You're like, huh. And eventually someone will say something like, I guess our imagination. And it's like, that's absolutely where it is. It's in your mind. The past and the future, it's all in your mind. So, what do you want to do if you want to heal your past? Heal your mind in this present.
Mm.
How do you go about cultivating a happy and joyful future? Cultivate a happy and joyful present. Past is in your mind in this moment. The future is in your mind in this moment. And we can extrapolate this idea to all sorts of things. Where are your ancestors? They're inside of you. They're still there. And even for those of us that have needed to create a lot of physical distance and separation from the primary caregivers that hurt us early on, or perhaps they're not even on this physical plane anymore.
Mhm.
The bad news is that they're still inside of you. But the good news is that through healing yourself, through doing the work now to heal your trauma or whatever it is, you will be healing your ancestors. So you can heal your mother and your father by healing yourself because they are in yourself. So that's the good news. There's hope.
Truly. Yeah. I mean, the way that I think about forgiveness is that it's calling all of your energy back to you in the present moment, right? Rather than leaving it in the past with these people who you have felt hurt by. And it doesn't mean it's so quick, right? You may have to do the same forgiveness prayers many, many, many times.
It's a practice.
One of the things I'm trying to remember what exactly you said, but I was thinking, oh, interesting. I actually think of it the opposite way, where I think of trauma as a pathway to spiritual awakening and a path back to self-love.
Yes,
I'm trying to
I agree
remember.
with that. I mean, it
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be,
yeah, yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah. Sure, sure.
There's this line, I wanna say it's Peter Levine, but it's
Mhm,
like trauma can destroy you
mhm,
or heal you, or you could die or you could resurrect your
mhm.
life. And that's really a fundamental lesson I found on the spiritual path is that it's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do with it.
Sure. Well, I mean, the same thing with trauma, right? It's not necessarily the actual thing that occurred, but it's how did your nervous system, what were the resources you had to manage this particular experience? And then throughout life, the healing process is a similar thing, right? It's like, can you creatively find those resources inside yourself or externally to help you respond and heal?
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. And, like, it's definitely a level of profundity to the whole practice, but also, like, a real down to earthness.
Hmm.
So, like, sometimes when I'm working with a client and they have some maybe self-esteem things and they're very self-critical and self-judgmental, I can simply ask, "If your best friend was with you right now, what would they tell you?" And they'd be like, "I think they'd tell me that it's all gonna be okay." Okay, where did that voice come from? Because your best friend isn't actually here right now.
Hmm.
That voice came from you. It all came from you. So it's actually a really wonderful, beautiful practice to be like, imagine the most loving and beautiful, unconditional self that you can, or being that you can. What would they tell you right now? And they say, anyone can answer this. Like, no one's like, I don't know. What would Jesus say to me right now? They can all come up with it. And that taps
Hmm.
into that, yes, there's something inside of us that is unconditionally loving that we can tap into.
Yeah. I feel like, so I have 2 dogs. One is a foster and one I've had for 8 years, and they're both active participants in my therapy sessions. And, you know, I could have someone who has suffered intensely at the hands of their parents and has lived, a life full of trial, and I watch them so tender and so sweet with my dogs.
Mm.
Right, like giving and receiving tremendous amounts of love, and I just feel like dogs, animals in general, can be such a great source of practicing, receiving and giving unconditional love.
There's 2 ideas similar to that I've been
Mm,
exploring. Because one, I just like subtle shifts of certain, understandings that we take for granted. Like there's this phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
mm,
As if like once you're ready, it's poof, like suddenly they're not knocking on your door as your teacher. But I like, once you're ready, you discover the teachers that are all around you and that have been all around you.
mhm,
And, yes, our animal friends are incredible teachers.
mm,
Flowers are incredible teachers. The fact that the sun rises every day is an incredible teacher. And I've also been kinda having the same shift of approach to, like, the deities that we worship. It's
mhm,
easy to think of them as something outside of us and
mm,
to worship something
mm,
outside of us. But I've been really getting into, Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva
mhm,
compassion lately, and, you know, the Bodhisattvas, whether as well as Buddha and Jesus and Natsu, they're examples, and we can aspire, to cultivate the same within ourselves and to
mhm,
see them as part of ourselves, and we also have this part of ourselves that is unconditionally loving.
mm. One of the practices that left a big impression on me many years ago in a course I took was a practice in we worked with animals, then we worked with a chosen deity, and it was embodying it and moving through the space that way. And for me, not, everyone has different access points or skill sets, but it's pretty amazing when you put your attention on it, right? Like I use this even in sessions with clients recalling a friend who has a certain kind of strength or self-respect. It's like what does that feel like in your body? So just to put your attention on your body and to recall, it's like what is, when you sit with a statue of Kuan Yin, what do you imagine that feels like? What does Kuan Yin feel like in the world, in the, and then have bringing that into your body and then physically embodying it and moving through space as her. So yeah, whether it's a puppy, because I'm often encouraging clients to speak to themselves the way they would to their kitten or their dog. Um, but the same, same can be said with a deity.
Absolutely. Yeah, your story reminds me of how much I love the double meaning of words and even just
Mm,
getting into the etymology and the true meaning behind words because we have this idea or we have this verbiage in our language that you have to make sense of a situation,
mm,
which means to understand it. And we make sense of our situation by tuning into our senses. Like, it's not just a coincidence that this is the
mhm,
same thing.
mhm,
So, absolutely, as you said, like, if you want to make sense of a situation or something that happened in your life, how did it feel when you were in that situation? What senses came up when you're in that situation? When you get in touch, when you sit down in front of whatever statue you have on your altar or many statues you have on your altar, and you get in touch with your Buddha nature or Christ consciousness, um, how does that feel? How does your body respond?
mhm, mm,
And that's how we make sense of our world. There's a whole discipline called narrative psychology that basically shows people that have a more coherent narrative of their life or more psychologically resilient. Well, you don't get a narrative of your life by writing it down on a piece of paper. You do it by making sense of it all.
mm. And you know how when you're wanting to like create a certain experience in your life or feel into something, somebody might say, like, post a photo or an image that reminds you of that state or that felt sense.
Hmm.
I have been actually taking people who are really in love with my dogs. I've been taking photos like of them with the dogs, and I send it to them so that they have this little piece that like a touch point that they can come back to the felt experience of like the weighted blanket of one dog or the soft or the ability to surrender. My one dog is always going like this. And so they have the visual, but then they also have the felt sense memory of
Hmm.
that. Yeah. Yeah. We're pretty remarkable beings in terms of our ability to use all these senses that, they're always available to us if we turn our attention to, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that it might be really obvious to others, it definitely wasn't obvious to me. We often divide up our experience between thoughts, emotions, and sensations. And obviously, this division is arbitrary, but I think it's something people just, it resonates with people experience. Like, yes, I have these thoughts in my head and these emotions in my body. But I like to point out one of those connects you to the world around you. There's one of them that's the gateway.
Mm,
That's your senses. Your emotions we feel internally, our thoughts are internally, but it's the senses that is our single and only gateway. Well, we can get really metaphysical, but just for now,
mhm,
it's our single and only gateway to the world around us. If you were, it's a silly thought experiment, but if you were, raised in a vat, like,
mm,
fed all the nutrients that you ever want, no thought would come into your mind. You wouldn't even have heard language
mhm,
to verbalize any thought in your mind. And so it's that mutuality, what in Buddhism they call that codependent origination of what you think you are and what this world is, and it meets at your senses. And if
mhm.
you want to feel alive, if you want to get in touch with this moment, you have to tune into this sensual world.
I'm I have to share what I pictured when you said, well, imagine you were growing in a vat, and I was like, "Oh, this could be an interesting business venture." like sous vide people, put them in a vat full of like, what's the water guy? Did all the water experiments, the crystallized water
Oh, The
emoji.
Secret Life of Water, the Japanese one? Or
Yeah, yeah. I'm just picturing people like a little chicken, a bone broth, and put some intentions of different, like, "You are so loved." Sous vide them for, certain period of time, and there you go.
um, it would be nice. Like, there's so many experiences we can't do for lots of reasons,
Mhm.
you know? And like, we can't create like a separate Earth and be like, what happens if these circumstances were to exist? Like, how would the human race kind of
Mhm.
evolve? Uh, So we can't do the vat experiment, but we have done some experiments that even now would be kind of barbaric. But the lesson that we all heard about in psychology is with the baby monkeys,
Right.
and one of them was with the wire cage, and the other one was with the worm cage. And of course, all the monkey did was go to the worm cage, was the foundation for attachment theory at the time. But to me, there's a number of important lessons around this. One is that like we are warm-blooded creatures and that warm-bloodedness is passed down. So, you know what my unconditionally loving mother is doing right now? She's volunteering at the hospital to cuddle the babies.
Oh.
Because modern science absolutely 100% agrees that we do need more than food and water. Babies that are
Mhm.
stroked more, cuddled more, held against a warm body more, they grow more. Their brains develop
Yep,
stronger.
100%. There's a wait list to do that here. It's like you try to get a dog if you don't have a yard and you try to get a dog out of, the SPCA or someplace, like, they won't. I struggled to adopt a dog before I had a yard.
Okay.
Similarly here, you can wanna hold a baby, but there's a wait.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you you wanna clean these. The hospital needs a lot of volunteers, It's like, "Do you wanna clean these bedpans or you wanna cuddle babies?" And, like, everyone
Yeah,
wants to cuddle. Who doesn't wanna cuddle babies?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
your mom, she either paid her dues or she was, on the list for a minute.
but that again, love grows people, love grows brains. So, that's been another pop quiz of mine lately.
Mhm.
I ask, "What grows plants?"
Mm.
People will say, "Oh, light, water, nutrients." Okay. "What grows humans?" And people are like, "What does grow humans?" We don't it doesn't rattle off the tongue as quickly as plants, and it's the love, it's the warmth, it's the acceptance, it's the attunement, and again, this doesn't just apply to young children. From birth until death, we all need love, connection, and belonging. I found the quote I was looking for. It is from Peter Levine, "Waking the
Okay.
Tiger Within."
Oh, yes.
The paradox of trauma is that it has both the power to destroy and the power to transform and resurrect.
Yeah, that was a foundational book for me. I have images of myself reading that book in my 20s on the bus, having these, like,
Yeah.
moments, realizing, like, "Oh, I am not this anxiety. This is not who I am. This was a response to trauma," right? That book
Mhm.
it was truly a gift. Do you think it's possible to access gratitude without being able to feel love? Do you think one precedes the other?
I never been asked this question before. I don't think anything precedes anything in general. I think we are complex, multidimensional, beautiful beings, incredible capacities for self-regulation and love. And if your ankle hurts and your leg and your arm hurts, you can heal both at the same time. I liked how you were mentioning earlier, you realized you are not your anxiety. And I feel like the practice of not this, what we call neti neti, is really powerful. I am not my thoughts. I am not what happened to me. And so is the exact opposite practice. So this is the mantra of intimacy.
Mm,
This too, this belongs, this belongs. Where we say yes and yes and yes to more and more things. Like, yeah, you're your emotions too, but you're also more than that. You're your breath, but where did the breath come from? It came from the trees and the plants. So I guess you must be the plants too. And I guess you must be the water and the
mhm,
cloud that nourish those plants. You are as much 70% cloud as you are 70% water. It's just as accurate to say. So we're organic beings and these things grow together. The bigger the trunk, the bigger the branch, the bigger the leaf, the bigger the flower. So absolutely, love, I do feel like, is the mantra of yes. It's saying yes to more and more. When we ask somebody if they want to go out on a date and they say yes, and then our heart says yes. It's just so much yes. And it opens us up and it shifts our worldview. And suddenly we find there's so much to be grateful for in this life when we are in those ecstatic throes of love. And at the same time, absolutely.
mm.
The practice of gratitude, of appreciating what we do have and lamenting less on what we don't have, is a wonderful practice that will also feed our love. And this is what the studies kind of show when you look at partners in relationships that say that they are unhappy and partners in relationships that report higher levels of happiness. There's often very little differences in the outward expressions of their life. Like, we all have stresses around work, we all have stresses around money, whether you're making $1 million or $10 a day, we stress, and suffering is a part of life. But what they find with the couples reporting high levels of happiness is that they, first of all, see more things to be grateful for, and they savor those things more, and they internalize those things more. So, partners in successful relationships, for example, make what psychologists call permanent, stable attributions of positive partner behavior.
God.
That's I'll explain it. What it means what it means is when your partner does a good thing, you conclude they are a good person. It's that simple. Wow, you did this nice thing for me. You are nice. Right? Partners in bad relationships, they're a little skeptical. They're like, why are you doing did you do something wrong? Are you cheating on me? Like, like you just doing this to win me over? Are you doing this to get what you want because you want to go out this weekend? So now you're being extra nice to me. So partners in more positive relationships, they savor more, they have gratitude more, and they internalize the nice things that they do. Right? A partner in a negative relationship becomes complacent. They're like, "Oh, yes, you wash the dishes, but you always wash the dishes. That's just what you do." Right? And I still, again, use my parents as an example. I was hanging out with them last week. My dad washes the dishes. My mom said, "Thank you, honey, for washing the dishes." Been together 40 years. It's like, it's easy to think that you don't need to express love and appreciation and gratitude to your partner. But love, like everything else, is a practice. Being grateful for your
Mhm.
partner is a practice. And expressing that appreciation for them is also a practice.
Yes. When I've had clients that I've given that practice to, share small things they appreciate or they're grateful for, like every night, or keep a mutual journal that they write things in, it's transformative, right? In
Mhm.
terms of their mind shift. When I asked that question, I was thinking about my work with Dr. Joe Dispenza,
Mhm.
who uses thinking of something you're grateful for to go into heart brain coherence, right? This state of wellness. And he doesn't explicitly say that. I learned that from like during neurofeedback. And that was my quick go-to was like think of my pup, right? Think
Mhm.
of like there are a lot of things now, but it used to be that I would have to just like think of my neighbor's dog and that could put me into a state of gratitude. But it got me really curious because, he also has you breathe slowly in and out through your heart before he's even talking of gratitude. But that's also an end point, right? So it's like a little bit chicken or egg, right?
Mhm,
It's like,
mhm,
oh, being with your heart, being in gratitude, even feeling gratitude for something that maybe it's happened in the past. It hasn't happened yet. But when you can access that, it creates a more porous, open space inside of you where you can then, express more appreciation or see the things to be appreciative of, right?
mhm,
But
mhm,
when there's trauma and there's constriction or numbness or tension in the tissue, it is certainly harder. And so it's like it has to be little micro practices to begin to open that tissue. Even comes back to yoga, right? It's like opening the fascia, doing stretches, addressing this from multiple angles.
mm. This is why it's so wonderful to connect with you, Charna. I feel like we've been on parallel paths for a
Mm.
long time,
Mm.
and we're finally converging.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I can't wait for we're gonna, follow this up with another conversation.
well, what I'm well, this is what I'm getting at because I feel like we're doing the same thing, but like slightly different ways, slightly different verbiage. So I like how you said micro practices. I tend to
Yeah.
use the word titrate.
Oh, yeah, there I see them as different
And
things,
but
but go
like
ahead.
bit by
Yeah.
like basically the basic idea is that you have to do things bit by bit, open a little bit and then close. I know of Joe Dispenza. I don't follow his work too much, but your description sounds exactly like what I've heard from Rick Hansen, who is this other kind of
Mhm, mhm,
scientist guy, because he has this practice where you have to heal, HEAL. And the H is when you have a positive experience, you move on to the E, you enrich it and you absorb it. And
mhm,
this is such a thing in modern world. As soon as we experience something good, we're on to the next thing.
mhm.
Sometimes we don't even experience it. Like influencers will order this lavish meal, take a photo, and then leave. Like, like wow, you're not even gonna enjoy the meal,
Insane.
let alone like when we do have a positive experience, how much time do we spend savoring it? And that's what Rick Hansen has found. He's like, you only need 30 to 60 seconds
Mhm,
to internalize the positive experiences in our life. And that's I'm sure what we both have found in couples work is like you need is like a 30-second hug, like before you leave for the day or when you come back during the day. 30 to 60 seconds. Those micro practices, those little deposits into your love account,
mm.
it grows interest. It's the best return on investment that you're gonna find.
Yeah, it's the tricky thing there, and this is where trauma comes into it. And why I say micro practices is that there can be this very catastrophic thinking. Like someone can come in and have one perspective, and when they're dysregulated, forget anything positive, and it just
Mm,
goes to a
mhm.
very extreme place. And so being able to, um, for one person, a 30-second hug is that they can't tolerate that. Right? So, they
Few
can't talk,
seconds, yeah.
but you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
sitting next to or, like, just someone barely pressing against them and any contact, like, there's such a range, and we forget that people have different capacities, but that's totally where titration comes in. It's like, "Let's be with this thing. Can we do it for 1 minute? Okay. Can we do it for another minute? Okay." Like, do we need to go away and feel something else? Like, "Hey, look out that window, exhale, focus on the dog, don't focus on the grief,"
Mm, mhm.
yeah. So, we're talking indirectly about rewiring the brain through the body, through practice, and you have had a yoga practice for so long, and you teach other people, and I'm curious, what is a practice that you could leave our listeners with around giving or receiving love and like inviting more love in, whether it's from themselves or from others.
As my MO is, I'll tangentially approach the question
Go
because
for
first I
it.
wanna talk about almost like what category of practices we
Yeah.
are looking at or what
Okay.
sort of parameters make for a good practice.
Sure.
Because As a very extreme example, let's say I go off to war and I come back with PTSD. What circumstances cause that PTSD? And they tend to be extremely unpredictable, right? I don't know when the next bombing is going to come. I don't know when the next bullet is going to come. Tends to be extreme. I'm just sitting playing cards with my fellow soldiers, and then suddenly the whole world disappears. So when you hear this idea that, say, growth happens at the edge of our comfort zone, we do need to step outside of our comfort zone to an extent in order to grow. But we want those practices to be steady, predictable, and
Mm,
highly controllable.
mm,
So I was even reading like rhythm is such a wonderful way to regulate the body. And I'm like, yeah, like walking slowly, that's rhythm. Breathing in and out slowly, that's rhythm. And then you go to the gym, and when we say like comfort zone, you have your safe zone, your growth zone, and your danger zone,
mm,
right? For you, 5 pound weight is your comfort zone. It's not going to stress you to grow. 50 pound weight, that's your growth zone. 500 pound weight, you're going to get injured. A sudden weight, unpredictably at your body when you're not ready for it, also going to create trauma. But what are people doing at the gym? Repetitions, controlled, guided, repeatable, predictable repetitions.
mm.
I'm going to lift this heavy thing and put it down 8 times, and then I will rest. And this is exactly what practices we're looking for. So this is why, like with trauma informed, like if I'm doing like a trauma informed class, I'm going to let everyone know ahead of time exactly what's going to happen in class. I'm not going to like suddenly in the middle of class be like, all right, guys, let's hyperventilate in this pose. However, at the beginning of the class, not only will I offer an outline, but I will highly emphasize that outline is an invitation. So we often begin meditations by closing our eyes. Okay, that can be very disorienting and scary for a lot of people. So closing the eyes is always an invitation. If you want to open your eyes, you want to keep them wide open, amazing. You are always in control of your experience. And then I say later, we might practice. So I'll invite you later to practice fire breathing or Kabbalah, right? And if you don't want to, you don't have to. If once you try it and it's not working out for you, good. Stop doing it. And even if I'm like instructing, say, a trauma informed meditation, I'm like, yeah, if anything that I say is a bit too much, you can close down. Like the human mind is really great at just being like, I'm not going to listen to this person. I'm just going to sing Beyonce in my head. That's a wonderful way of self care and self regulation to just be like, I'm going to distract myself and turn away. So I want to emphasize that those are the higher arching kind of principles that we bring to our practice. We kind of want to know what we're doing ahead of time. We want it to be predictable. We want to get permission to change, to close when we become overwhelmed, and notice this sensation of overwhelm. And it's all an invitation, if I didn't already say that. So I even say like the breath is wonderful. I love the breath. Breath doesn't work for everyone.
Mm.
As soon as you say listen to the breath, some people, am I breathing right? Am I getting air? Oh my God. Like it's not the best. Sometimes sound is a wonderful shift. Like just listen to the sounds that are around you. So how much time do we have for a practice?
So, how about 5 minutes? Do you have something that's like 5 minutes?
Yeah, of course, of course. That's what I'm saying. You only need 30 to 60 seconds is all you need.
Well,
But,
exactly. So go ahead.
I'm gonna let's do one that kinda integrates a lot of the things we've been exploring. So, it's often nice to find some contrast. So, as long as somebody listening isn't driving or is in a safe space, like, take your shoulders and draw them forward, and take your chin and butt it out, and kinda, like, hunch the spine. And again, you might close the eyes or just keep them open and check in. How does this feel in your body? What textures, qualities, emotions, words might you use to describe this position that your body is in? And let's try something else. Let's straighten the spine. Let's start with the shoulders up to the at the ears, just to bring them back and just to bring them down in a relaxed way. Let's turn the palms up rather than down. And notice how that will bring a little bit more openness to the shoulders. And almost like your neck was a periscope, try to extend it, to extend the crown of the head towards the sky and check in. How does this feel? We call them feelings because we feel. So not only how does this feel, but where does it feel? What changes in your body when we put the body in this position? And then I'll just offer a simple breathing exercise. If breathing doesn't work for you, feel free to skip. But in just a moment, we'll inhale through the nostrils and almost like there's a straw in your lips. We will exhale through pursed lips of the mouth on a long, slow, and even exhale. At any point, feel free to breathe normally. At any point, feel free to shift your attention to a way that serves you in a better way. If you feel so called, take a deep inhale through the nostrils, and then through pursed lips of the mouth, exhale out. Let's try 3 breaths. Inhale, exhale, pursed lips of the mouth. Last one. And return to breathing normally in and out of the nostrils. And simply take a moment to honor what happened. Whether you had a good experience or a bad experience or a neutral experience, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. That particular breathing practice for listeners, I've shared that before with a brain gym hookup. I think it's so useful and such an immediate, like relative, immediate shift of state, right? For calming the body. And so I love that you did that. That's such a good one. Can't sleep at night, you
Mhm.
know. And even notice the how the pace of my words is different after 4 breaths. Anything you'd like to share with listeners as well as how they can find you?
My name is Zach Beach. You can find me at zachbeach.com and Zach Beach Love on all the social medias. And you are loved. You are lovable and loving. And there's nothing you need to do, change, or improve about yourself to receive all the love that your heart can hold. You are perfect just the way you are, including all of your so called imperfections. They are just as beautiful as the love that is always shining forth from your own heart.
Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank
Good
you,
to
Charna.
Thank you for joining us. If you appreciated this episode, my online course, Pathways to Peace, Mindful Practices for Transformative and Vibrant Living, is open for ongoing enrollment. This means you can sign up at any time. It's a self-paced course to make it manageable with your schedule. And as for the coursework, you'll receive 4 weeks worth of daily videos where I teach you how to understand your nervous system and its reactions, how to think more clearly and gain perspective, how to transform the ways your body communicates through physical sensations, how to identify emotions, where they come from, and what they're telling you, how to discover why you react in ways that produce shame and learn tools to manage these reactions, how to reduce your anxiety and destructive impulses, and how to diminish self hatred when you are not your best self. You can also sign up for weekly group coaching calls where you'll have direct contact with me and I'll answer any of your questions. If you want to learn more before then, and hope you do, you can go to my course page, courses.charnacassell. That's CharnaCassell.com for more information. So if you appreciated this episode, please like, rate, and review it and share it with your friends. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Laid Open Podcast. That's LAID Oop, fuck. Okay. That's LAIDOPENPODCAST. All one word. As well as if you go to charnacassell.com, you can join my newsletter where you can get information about upcoming courses I'll be offering, and I do free giveaways. Plus, you'll get discounts as well as resources that I share. At passionatelife.org, you can get more information about my private practice and the kind of work that I do. This has been Laid Open Podcast with your host, Charna Cassell. We all have different capacities, but I believe in our capacity to grow and change together. Until next time.